Vayedaber Hashem Moshe Lemor. Daber al Aaron v'amar te'elov. Speak to Aaron, you should say to him, Baloscha es haneros, when you kindle the lights, El mupnei amnora yiru shivas haneros. See in a moment. So Rashi, very famous Rashi, in the previous portion, what we discussed, we spoke about the inauguration of the Mishkan, how the 12 Nesiim princes had brought special gifts and sacrifices in honor of the inauguration of the Mishkan. And there was a specific order. And Hashem set the order. What was the order? The first one to bring the gift and the sacrifices was Nachshon ben Aminodov from Shevet Yehuda. Yehuda is leadership, that's royalty. He's the first one. Who's the second one to bring? The son of ben Tzuar, Lamati Yisachar. Shevet Yisachar, they were the second one to bring. The third one to bring was the Nasi, the prince of the tribe of Zvulun. Rashi, last week's parsha, cited the Midrash. Yehuda, the prince of Yehuda, was the first one to bring. Why? Because Yehuda is royalty. Royalty is the first one to bring the gift. They have priority over everyone. And therefore, Nachshon ben Aminodov, being the prince of the tribe of Yehuda, he's the first one to bring his gifts and his korban. So when Hashem had said, Nitzano ben Tzuar, when Moshe says Nitzano ben Tzuar from the tribe of Yisachar should bring, immediately Reuven comes, the prince of Reuven comes and says, it's not acceptable. I understand Yehuda comes first, he's royalty. That's leadership. But I'm the Bechor, and I as the Bechor, I should be the second one to bring the gift and the korbanos. So Moshe Rabbeinu says, I'm not the one setting the order here. It's Hashem setting the order. And the reason why Yisachar, the son of Ben Tzuar, was the one to be the second one to bring it is because who came up with the idea of bringing gifts to inaugurate the Mishkan? The son of Ben Tzuar was his idea. Initially, nothing would have happened. The son of Ben Tzuar says, it's something we should do. Now, why should they do it? Because Rashi explains in last week's parsha, when it came to the building of the Mishkan, the Nesiim were nearly left out. Because they had said, let the Jews do whatever they have to do. And after they realized that nearly everything was done, the only thing that was not given were the precious stones for the Choshen. And that's the only thing, that was their level of participation. So as a correction of that being laid back and not initiating it and being immediate, this was a correction on that. But who came up with that understanding? It was Msano ben Tzuar of the Shevet Yisachar. So therefore Hashem said, because they are the ones who initiated it, although he's not the Bechor, he takes precedent over the firstborn. So therefore, though Reuven is the firstborn, he's not the second one, but rather Yisachar is the second one to bring the gift and to bring the korbanos. That's Chazal, that's the Midrash. Okay? But factually, there was an order. They all brought it the first day, and Hashem says, now, there's going to be a sequence of order, how you bring the gifts, how you bring the various korbanos, the sacrifices. Okay? But if you take a look over there, Levi, Shevet Levi is not represented. The 12 tribes are represented. It was over a 12-day period. Levi is the 13th. Levi is not mentioned. So the question is, why is Levi not mentioned? The one who initiated it was Yisachar. Yisachar initiated, Levi did not participate. He's not mentioned. Hashem didn't say Levi should be one of the people to bring it. So evidently, Levi was not represented. Now the question is, why was Levi not represented? Was it because they didn't make the grade? Maybe because, again, we're going back to the old story. Although Levi did not participate in the Chet Egel, although they didn't, but Aaron, because he had some level of participation, gathering of the gold, maybe that's the reason why they weren't. So Aaron himself questioned what exactly is the reason why he was left out? Is it because there's some kind of deficiency in himself or in his tribe, and that's why they were not included? Or maybe for some other reason, and he didn't know. So we'll see in a moment. Now, the Ramban in last week's Parsha, very interesting Ramban. The Ramban explains, we know how careful the Torah is not to add a single letter unless it's necessary to write that extra letter. And here the portion of the Nisim is repeated 12 times. Literally verbatim, 12 times, the exact same words are mentioned, repeated 12 times. You have an extra, whatever it is, an extra like 60 psukim, verses, which are identical. It could have said, the Nisim had brought, these were the gifts, these were the karbonos, they're identical. And it was over a 12-day period, and this was the order. But rather, every day it says this one had brought, the first day had brought this, and it articulates the lineage, what they brought. The second day, same thing over and over again. What's it all about? So Ramban says something very interesting. He says that although in the physical, in the material, it was identical, but since each one of the shvatim, each one of the tribes, have another level of representation in the spirituality, in the spiritual infrastructure of Klal Yisrael, when they had brought each one of the gifts, each gift was infused with a different kavanah, with a different intent. So though it may have been the same gold vessel and the same silver vessel and the same animal, or whatever it may be, but each shevet had infused it with its level of representation versus the whole. So Ruvain has its profile, spiritual profile, its contribution, its level of representation. This is the Ramban. So therefore, that's not considered, it's not repeated. It was only the medium was the material, but in its value, its level of representation was different level of representation. Therefore, that's not considered repeated, although in the words, it's verbatim in the physical, but since each one was infused with another level of intent, therefore, it's a different reality of every aspect of what they contributed. That's the Ramban, okay? So when we speak about the 12 tribes contributing what they gave, the gifts, the korbanos, what are we speaking about? We're speaking about not the material, but this is a representation of the spiritual infrastructure of the Jewish people. Okay? Now, if this is the spiritual infrastructure of the Jewish people, why isn't Levi part of the infrastructure of the Jewish people? They're not included. And Aaron had this question. It's not just giving gifts, but rather this is a level of what? Of representation, and Hashem set the order. Yehuda, Yisachar, Zvulun, and the others to follow. Based on the hierarchy of the value, what they are. I mean, seemingly, Levi is the ultimate. Levi are the only ones who did not participate in the Chet Egel. So why weren't they included in the order of what? Of participating in the gifts to inaugurate the Mishkan. Okay? It's very interesting. We find that, as I mentioned, why were the Nisim there immediately to bring the gifts and the karbonos to inaugurate the Mishkan? Because regarding the building of the Mishkan, they were seemingly they failed because they were too slow to be there, because they said, let the Klal Yisrael do their thing, and whatever's lacking, we'll do ours. They narrowly were left out. Is that claim against Levi also? It's not clear. It says the Nisim, and it's written deleted to indicate this failing. We don't find, did Levi participate in the building of the Mishkan? Right? There's no mention Levi participated in the building of the Mishkan. Or maybe they did. Were they lackadaisical? Or were they not? Were they laid back or weren't they laid back? What exactly happened? It's unclear. So seemingly, evidently, they needed a tikkun the way the rest of them needed a tikkun. Or maybe yes, maybe no. It's unclear. I'm not clear on this. But over here, Rashi cites the Medrash, Loma nischu parshas Menorah parshas HaNisim. Why does there juxtapose the portion of the kindling of the Menorah to the portion of the Nisim inaugurating the Mishkan? When Aaron had seen the inauguration of the Nisim, how they participated, he was slightly offended, he was not included within the inauguration. Why wasn't he asked to join? Maybe he wanted to join, but you could only be part of it if Hashem said you're part of it. He was not asked to be part of it. Lahu v'lo shifto. He's not represented, and the Shevet's not represented. He felt this reflects something negative on himself or the Shevet. Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu, chayecho. Hashem says to Aaron, I swear on your life, shelecho gedol m'shalehem. Your participation is greater than theirs, what they had done. Shatomad l'kumetiv v'neris. You're going to kindle and prepare the candles to be kindled. Therefore, your participation is greater than theirs. So the Ramban asked the obvious question. I mean, the Nisim, this is a one-time thing. They're bringing the gifts, the korbanos, to inaugurate the Mishkan. I mean, who goes in the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur? Only Aaron's qualified, nobody else. Which is an indication you can't be closer than the Kohen or than the Levi. The Levi officiates, is the officiant to assist the Kohen in his service. I mean, so what's he offended? You're way up there. The others don't rate whatsoever. In terms of the way Levi and the Kohen, their value versus their relationship with Hashem, it's not comparable. So why? Because Aaron was not asked or a Shevet to participate in the inauguration. This somehow we saw it as a negative. This was a negative indication where ultimately he continuously, it wasn't a one-time thing, it's on a continuous basis. Every Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol goes into the Holy of Holies. Every day, the only person qualified to officiate is only the Kohen. And what's so special about the menorah? What about the rest of them? Why is the Torah singling out the menorah? What about the rest of the Avodas HaKorban, the other services which the Kohen does? These are the questions the Ramban asks, and the phenomenal questions. The Ramban cites a midrash that the menorah represents the lighting of the menorah, the Chashmonoim, and ultimately every home, Jews will light the menorah to commemorate the miracle of Hanukkah. That's how the Ramban explains this. So this is only representative of the future. But I explained it differently. Now, what was Aaron offended? Because, especially according to the Ramban, the way he explains it, what did each of the gifts, each of the korbanos represent, the sacrifices? This is the spiritual profile of the Klal Yisrael, because each gift, although in the material was identical and had the identical weight, but since it was infused with a different intent representing their value versus the whole in terms of spirituality, therefore is the equivalent of different gifts and different korbanos. Okay? So Levi is not part of the spiritual profile of Klal Yisrael. So Hashem says, your participation is greater than theirs. Why? Now, I always mention the Gemara above Basra. The Gemara says, Misha rotze lahachkim yadrim. If you want to become wise, when you say the Shemon Esrei, the Amidah, it should be in a southerly direction. If you want to become wealthy, yatzbin, you should say it in a northerly direction. Why? Because the menorah was on the southern wall of the Heichal, of the covered sanctuary, and the shulchan, the gold table with the showbread, was on the northern side. The menorah represents, that's Torah Sheba'al Peh. That's the illuminator for the Torah Shebechsav. That's what it represents. The shulchan is royalty. That's malchus. That's wealth. So therefore, if you want to be wiser, you say the Amidah in a southerly direction. Because Torah Sheba'al Peh, that's ultimate level of clarity. That's illumination. Wealth is the northern, that's the shulchan, because that's on the northern side. So now, we say, the Chazal tell us, the Aron was Torah Shebechsav, right? The luchos, the second set of luchos, the broken luchos, the Torah was in the Aron. The menorah is Torah Sheba'al Peh. That elucidates the Torah Shebechsav. When God said that in the written, what did he mean? The elucidation of that's represented by the kindling of the menorah. Now, what initiates and activates the forces to have the clarity to come upon the truth of Torah? to fully grasp and delve into the depth and the breadth of Torah Shabbat. That's the kindling of the menorah. So what we said in the past was this: you have a perfect body, but there's no soul in the body. What's the valve? The body doesn't function. So what is the function? What's the most important component of a body? The soul, the neshama. What is the heartbeat? What allows Klal Yisrael to be unique, to function, and have the relation with Hashem? That's the Torah itself. Now, what is our connection to Torah? Why are we able to come upon its truth and to integrate it and fully absorb it? It's only through Torah Sheba'al Peh. It's only through studying the Torah and understand what God said. Now, who brings that about? It's the kindling of the menorah which activates those forces, what we call siyata d'shmaya, to come upon those truths. Therefore, Hashem says to Aaron, it's true. They are the spiritual infrastructure. But what's within the spiritual realm, what's the neshama of that spiritual infrastructure? What gives it value? It's your participation. It's your kindling of the menorah. Because the only relevance Klal Yisrael has to Torah itself is only due to that kindling of the menorah. Therefore, therefore, your involvement, your going to the Holy of Holies has nothing to do with that. That's forgiveness. Every day, the service is other aspects. But the core and the core function and the soul of Klal Yisrael, that's the Torah itself. That's Torah Sheba'al Peh. Therefore, Hashem says to Aaron, your participation is greater than theirs. That's how we explained it in the past. God Nachi. It's on